Chapter 3. The Path of Beauty. So ran life for 3 days, 3 whole days of beauty and goodliness to the children and household generally. Betty lived, loved, and worked in her home world, and gave only a slow hand and cold heart to that wonderful world of romance wherein it had been her delight to live. But the morning and the evening of the 4th day came also. It was after 7 o'clock and Friday, and Betty was still dutiful and wore her blue apron. Outside on the path, the 3 bathed and brushed children played. The baby was in hammock, the kitchen fire and Mary awaited Betty. When all at once, through the cottage came Mr. Bruce's voice excitedly. "Betty, Betty, come here!" And Betty, in wonderment, went. He stood in the doorway of the bathroom with a sheet of manuscript in his hand. "Who did this?" he said. Whose is this?" "What? Where? Show me," said Betty, and stood a tiptoe to see. "It's your writing," said her father. It might have blown out of my room. One of the children might have brought it," said Betty. "But who did it? Whose is it?" "Mine," said Betty, and turned a flushing face aside. Her father smiled. "Oh," he said. He read a few lines. Then he sat down on the edge of the bed and read a little more, and smiled again. "Where's the rest?" he asked. Then he looked up and saw the distressed signal in her face. "It's first rate," he said frankly. "I'm not humbugging you, child, but you've surprised me." "Why?" asked Betty, leaning back on a damp towel to survey him in astonishment. "I'm not surprised at your writing. I'd be surprised if you didn't, seeing you're 17 and a girl." "Dot did I remember. They all do. I'm surprised at what you've written. Let me see a bit more of it tonight." Betty looked at her father incredulously. "Really?" she said. "Really," he said, and folded up the page and handed it to her. "Now who the dickens has been putting earth and pebbles into the bath? It's very rough on one's skin, this sort of thing," and he began to clean it out. "I haven't," he said, stopping short. "I'll have to do with a shower." Betty went kitchenwards in a dream. There the gridiron and the fire awaited her. She looked at both dazedly. Her father had been pleased and surprised at her work, and he was not like ordinary fathers, not even like ordinary well-read fathers. He had been an editor for months now. He wrote innumerable stories, skits, and sketches. He was the author of a book. What wonder his opinion counted with her as one of the first in the world. "Ain't the fire good enough for you?" asked Mary at last. Said Betty slowly. "It's first rate." "I'm not humbugging you, child." Said, "Oh." The lines that served the kitchen maid for eyebrows climbed far upon her forehead. Okay, we're gonna have to cut right here. I gotta start over that sentence. "Ain't the fire good enough for you?" asked Mary at last. Said Betty slowly. "It's first rate. I'm not humbugging you, child." The lines that served the kitchen maid for eyebrows climbed far up on her forehead. "Eh?" she gasped. "Oh," said Betty. "What did you say? Chops? Steak?" "Oh yes, steak." "Give it to me. Where's the gridiron? What do you want? Nancy bothering me when you know I'm so busy. Go out of the kitchen at once." Breakfast was ready at last, but was something of a scramble this 4th morning, and no bell had been rung. That in itself was the merest detail, but taken with other things, to wit, Cyril's forgotten lunch and the burning of baby's milk, it had its meaning to those who, running, read. Betty's eyes wandered off into her father's face throughout that meal. He seemed to have forgotten all about her once more, or remembered that she poured out coffee. His thin, intellectual face, pallid as ever, was bent over some papers beside him, and now and again his fingers wandering through his black hair, still damp from his shower bathe, and made it look odd, a pity, Betty thought dreamily, so early in the day. Once or twice his dark eyes looked through her, but of course he did not see her. No one at the table would have accused him of seeing. And then he got up, rolled his manuscript together, asked Nancy where his hat was, and Joan if she had seen his bag. And when these were put into his hand by each little daughter, he was for stepping into the veranda briskly, when Joan said, "You've only got your slippers on, Daddy. I'll get your boots." He was vexed with himself and looked so, but he patted Joan's rosy cheeks, put on his boots, and went away without remembering to look at anyone else, even authoress Betty. And on the fourth morning Betty gave up her half hour in the garden. Joan wept with disappointment, and the little boys coaxed and pleaded, but Betty had deaf ears and bribed them with loaf sugar to be good. By encompassing that half hour and hurrying over the cooking, she was able to settle to her writing by 10 o'clock instead of 11. She was very anxious to read over the pages to be submitted to her father in the evening. At 1 o'clock sharp Joan rang the bell, and she repeated the process every 5 minutes until 1:30, when one little girl and 2 little boys rattled and banged at Betty's door and implored her to come out. And she came with scarlet cheeks and luminous eyes, for she had dipped into her world of romance again and lost herself in its glory. "You are the noisiest, most dreadful children on earth," she burst out, and when she saw the eager trio in the hall. "What do you want now?" "We want you to come, Betty dear," said Joan. "Well, I can't. Run away and play at once. Didn't I start you at your play? Didn't I give you everything you wanted? Go away. You're getting nominally spoilt, and that's what it is." Pepper began to cry. "Want my pudding," he said. "Well, you can't have your pudding yet. Go and play trains with Dick." Joan's eyes widened in distress, and Dick's mouth corners fell. "Can't we have our dinner first?" they asked. "It's not dinner time," said Betty. "Yes, it is, Betty." Betty darted into her room to consult her little clock, started at it, shook it, listened to it, and then turned to Joan. "It's nearly 1:45, she said. "Why didn't you ring the bell as I showed you?" "I did. I've been ringing and ringing hundreds of times, haven't I, Dick?" "Yes, hundreds," Dick said eagerly. "Oh," said Betty, and her face grew crescent-fallen. Then it flushed, and her eyes looked horrified. "Baby!" she said, and darted past the children down the passage. Mary was pacing up and down the dining room, hushing the wailing baby. "I'm sure I don't know whatever's the matter with her," she said. "She's been yelling and yelling all morning, enough to send anyone mad." Oh dear," said Betty. "I forgot her 9 o'clock bottle, and her next one is an hour or more late. The selfish thing I am. She's starving." Everyone was impressed and horrified, and Baby wept louder than ever. "Keep her a minute," said Betty, and ran off to the pantry for a bottle. Fresh disaster awaited her. The fire was out, and she had to gather chips to kindle enough flame to warm the cup of milk and water that stood for the bread of life to the 6-month-old infant. Betty was crying herself as she fed the baby. Never before had she forgotten her in so culpable a manner. Culpaple. Never before had she forgotten her in so culpable manner. If it would do any good, she confessed to the wet-eyed baby, I'd burn everything I'd ever written, darling. I do hate myself. It was 2:30 before the baby's hunger was appeased, for long-drawn sobs continually interrupted the meal. Then the little eyelids fell into the breath, and the breath came more evenly, and the lips grew more peaceful, and the baby slept. Then Betty, having settled her in the hammock, returned to the house, and there was Joan, fractious rare event, and Dick and Pepper were crying. The poor authoress was woebegone exceedingly. It was 1 hour and a half past the children's dinner time. The kitchen fire was once more a thing of dead embers. The grilled chops were merely burnt pieces of meat and bone. The potatoes, baked in their jackets, were hard and cold. Betty rang for the pudding, too ashamed to utter a word of reproach to Mary, or a word of consolation to the children, and Mary carried in a burnt sago pudding, with black skin on the top of it. That pudding was Betty's last straw. Seeing it, she burst into tears, and she was joined loudly by the children. It was all right at 1 o'clock, said Mary, in self-defense, but you wouldn't come, and then baby cried, and I had to pick her up, and I clean forgot the pudding. It's my fault, said Betty tragically. Everything's always my fault. Bring in bread and butter and jam and milk to drink. Then, seeing Mary's hesitation, don't tell me the milk's spilled and the bread's new and we've no butter. The girl grinned. We're out of butter, she said, but the milk's all right and the bread ain't new. So Betty went back to her blue apron in the afternoon and tried to become a housewife again. She strove to make up the 4 babies for her neglect by extra and exceeding gentleness and care for the rest of the day. But her heart was heavy and her spirits sore. The impossibility of belonging even for separate hours to the 2 worlds, the world of romance and the world of reality, struck her tragically. Surely hard less possible was it to reconcile the roles of servitor to God and Mammon. Well, that was chapter 3. So Betty wanted to write, but when she wrote, she got so involved in her work that she forgot all about feeding the children. So I'll move the camera and I'll do a little work because we all have that list to follow. And then we'll read chapter 4, Nancy's Revenge, page 31. Stay tuned.